This time on Captain Chaos's laboratory, we're going to be working on an elf-made toys workshop or factory from Lemax. And this was sent in. This was floating around in the box, and this little brass hook, which I don't know where they go. I haven't found a spot at the moment where those came from. So, have to figure that one out later. But it doesn't work. Nothing. So, it's absolutely, positively dead. So, I'm figuring it's one of two things. It's either a bad motor, shorting everything out, or we got a bad wire on the power side, either in this or in the port in the back. One of the two isn't allowing the connection or the circuit. But just to make sure my AC adapter didn't die, there we go. Center is positive, and the outer edge of the barrel is negative, 5 volts. So, this is a 4.5 volt house. This is a 4.5 volt Lemax adapter with no load on it. It's a little higher than 4.5 volts. So, plug her back in, click, and nothing. Now, on some, you can try and rotate stuff like this, but it doesn't move because this has a gearbox. It also moves probably this gear, this belt, this spiral. So there's too much things, too many things, too much movement to rotate and break the motor free to see if that's the problem, because the gearbox uses probably worm gears to transfer from one to the other since it's got lots of motion. So I'm going to first put this and this little hook out of the way so I don't lose them. Also, I'm going to remove the sign so I don't lose it or break it. And now, before I do anything, I'm going to check the power in the switch, or check the switch to see if the power wire is broke. Well, they usually just come right apart. You might have to use something to separate them, but they're generally not glued. And this one will probably prove me wrong. Just need something thin to get in here. There we go. Starting to separate. Well, this is probably the tightest one I've seen that wasn't actually glued. There we go. And alright, now I should have enough to pop it all the way off with just my thumbnail. No, that's not a good sign. That the wheel just comes right out. Indicates that the screw has come loose as well. The connections on here look good. There is no screw in here, so I might have to go get one so this actually stays where it's supposed to. Just checking the solder joints. They all look pretty good. So I guess now we need to get into the unit itself and see what's going on. First things first, get rid of the power. Now this is a plastic house, and looks like this back panel was attempted to be pried off since it's cocked up at an angle. Also going to set these up and out of the way. I never keep these on my stuff. They always annoy me because they get caught on stuff. But there's a gap, and this panel is lifted at the top. So I think the previous owner was trying to get in here to see if this was bad. So let's see if we can continue where they left off. So I use a spudger, and I'm going to put a little pressure on it to see if we can get it to come out. This is one of the advantages of a plastic house. They are usually a little bit easier to dismantle because there's more seams that you can find. Okay, this piece goes all the way around to this piece. Actually, this entire back, it looks like, is one big piece. What can I see inside? You see the power port. The two wires appear to be hooked up just fine. I see this cable running down to the bottom. It looks like the circuit board is right in here. So before we continue prying this plastic, since this plastic goes all the way over to at least here, if not to here, let's try and take the bottom off. So it is plastic, like I said, and there's 6 feet, and I bet you underneath those 6 feet, probably 6 screws. Yep. So let's take out the 6 feet. Which, man, these are actually glued in really well. Usually they just pop right out. They must be upgrading their double back tape. Six feet. Now I'll use a Phillips screwdriver, and we're going to unscrew the 6 screws. Couple more to go. Try and get this thing fixed and back before Thanksgiving would be great. That way, if they're doing a Christmas display, most people start the Christmas display slightly after Halloween. Not me. I don't put up a Christmas display. I do have a couple of Christmas houses, but those are more I got from Goodwill or contests, and I usually just end up giving them away on the channel or in person at events. But I like Christmas, but there's too many houses. I prefer Halloween. So okay, 6 screws. Here's the bottom. I'm going to unplug the speaker, and then I'll show you what's under here. So here's the base, and then there's the bottom. We have a gear chain here, which it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gears underneath this plate that drive this rotating drum. Got your circuit board here, and it looks like the motor is going to be this plug right here on the corner. Let me get some specs on so I can read it. So if their coding is correct, then this should be the motor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it back in. We're going to unplug the motor and see if it lights up. It's not going to make any sound since I unplugged the speaker. Plug it in. Unplug the motor. there's the lights. So now let's plug this back in and see if we get the sound. And off. So we got a bad motor. Very common. When a motor goes bad, I say this a lot and I explain it in the forums, electricity takes its leaf past the resistance back to its home. So it's coming in through the cord, it wants to come in, do its thing, and go back to the AC adapter. Least path of resistance is something that's dead shorted because there's no resistance. So it's coming in, sees a dead motor, goes woo, and then goes right back to where it needs to go. Doesn't need to pass go or collect any cash from the banker. It's just done. So the easiest way to check them is to unplug the motor, and if the lights and sound come back, you have a dead motor. If the lights and sounds don't come back, then you continue on and unplug maybe the lighting, which is this. The lighting is this one right here, and that's it. The big one right here is your off-on volume switch. So now we need to find where this motor is hiding. So if I follow the wires up, the wires go under the circuit board and up into a hole right in here. So I don't see access from the circuit board, but it does look like this inner piece might come off. There's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws that are holding the big frame on. So I'm going to take these out and see if this is the proper way of doing this or not. There's 1. 2. 3. And 4. And last but not least, 5. And this is the big reason why I like plastic houses. I know a lot of people don't. That's fine. Personal preference is perfect. Plastic houses generally come apart easier. They're a lot more forgiving. And there's that. This now leaves us with the base house. So now it looks like the only way to get to the motor is to remove the back plastic. There are no access panels I can see. Under the circuit board, I see a triangular cutout wedge, which I can see the edge of right here, and it's solid. And then there's a hole, maybe the diameter of my pinky, that all the wires go through right back here. It's actually the same size hole as that one right there. So there's no access to the components. And technically, taking that base off isn't going to do anything for you. So you probably don't have to do that. But that's why I do it. So if you need to do it at your place, you can have a guide on how to get to it. So, plug it again. And get the cord out of my way. So I know the motor is up in here. Now I just need to follow the seams and see if I can separate the back of this house. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a clip here which has been popped out, which is why this is sticking out and wasn't flush, because the plastics, they use clips and it pops back in. So again, another advantage to plastic over porcelain or resin. Again, it's personal preference, but from my side where I repair these, I prefer the plastic houses. More forgiving, and they are more well, there's more access to the components, let's put it that way. also a few other advantages of the plastic houses. The plastic is dyed, and the dye that goes into making the plastic the color that it is usually has a longer lifespan or more longevity than the paint that's put on porcelain. Resin's right in the middle, I found. Resin still fades and deteriorates. Not as fast as porcelain, but faster than plastic. So, what I'm doing is this bottom pan is clipped into these pieces too, so I'm trying to slowly pop it down. I got 1, 2, 3 of the clips on this wall. There's one here, one here, one here, and there's one here in the corner that I'm working on at this moment. So I can see if I can get a little bit more viewing room in here to see where that motor is. There it is. Motor's right here. So, definitely need to get the back of this off. So I definitely need to find all the seams. Okay, that's unclipped. And what's weird is I don't really see any glue. Like the last Christmas one I did that was mine, that I tore apart. Even prying these down, there was glue. This doesn't have any glue. It's kind of strange. Maybe they just got better with clips. Hopefully you can see it. There's the motor. It's a standard motor. Low speed's a 300 CA and high speed is a 300 RF or something like that. I have them on my Facebook and website, but I will put whatever it is once I get it out in the description below. I usually put down a link to the motors and a link to some of the tools and components used to do this. Alright, so taking a peek inside, you see that wire is really tight. There we go. You see all sorts of fun stuff. See, it's going to be kind of hard to get to. Wonder if this wall will come off, make it easier. I just need one of the two walls to come off, either the big back one or the side. Side will come off, except we got a little elf here that's blocking the wall from pivoting out. So I wonder if I can pop the top and get it to pivot out from the top. The bottom's already disconnected, and this side's disconnected at the base. And there's a hollow brick right here where you can see the pin that holds the wall in alignment. They probably put the elf there so you can't take this wall out. You might have to remove the elf. He is glued on. Or she. It's also not plastic. This elf is kind of a resin or rubber. It's really flexible. because he's bendy. The edge of this is sharp, so I'm just using it as a scraper. Alright, now let's see if I can pop that pin. It's sticking through the wall. There we go. And there's another one up here. You have to slide it down over these gussets. These gussets are glued into the top. You can see the notches. Once I got the tool in here to break that finger free, I was able just to slide it down. And now you can see the mechanism. I might be able to get it with what I have off already. Might. So if this wall flexes out just a little more. Oh, it's got that impossible gear too. It figures. That's too big. One screw. Those screws from the bottom. Long, thin screwdriver comes in handy for stuff like this. I actually have a long, thin one in here that would probably work maybe better, but I like these because the electronic screwdriver, you can spin the body and the top stays stationary. Now that last screw would be a little harder, but I think I can get it from right here. Screwdriver's too short. Long screwdriver. So this space right here, I can get to that third screw that's holding the gearbox in. Less invasive, the better. Got it out. Now we just need to feed the wire through. Just enough that I get as much slack as I can. I don't feel like fishing it back. So, this motor is covered in grease. There's grease all over this thing. So, definitely been well lubricated enough to destroy the motor. That's the most common cause. But real fast, I'm just going to check the wear and the gears. Oh yeah, you can't, but I can definitely hear that motor clicking. That's a bad motor. So let's get it out and see if there's a number on it. So, little screwdriver. First thing we do is pop the belt. Set that right there. Take out these two little screws. If you remember, every time I say this, don't lose them. I actually did that earlier today on another one I was fixing. It fell, it bounced, it's gone into the abyss. But I save all the little screws from motors that are trash. Or when I buy kits, sometimes the kits come with the screws. Not always. And I just have a little envelope full of motor screws. And I do this enough. So it's all slimy there, and the face of this thing is shiny. Shiny, shiny, shiny. Too much grease. All over my hands. So next I'm going to pop the pulley. There we go. And cut the wires. Well, I don't know if you can see very well, but this thing is just covered in grease. And see if there's a part number on it. There is. This is a SRF 300CA. 1100 or 11,440 revolutions per minute. So. And my replacement motors, where are you? There's one. This one is nondescript. Let's see what about this guy. This guy is a SRF 300CA with short wires. That's why I trimmed those so long. Going to make sure it spins, because I just literally, before I filmed this, had 3 motors die on me within a few seconds. Doesn't spin. Okay. I think I got a bad batch of motors from China. This one. You can always test these with a couple of AA's. You can hear that. That one works. This one already has the same pulley on it. So, and this one is another nondescript motor. Oh, you can almost make it out. The ink has come off of it. Right there. But anyway, let's clean off the excessive grease. Excessive grease burns out motors. I'm only cleaning the grease in the area or vicinity of the motor in the bottom. And I'm looking here and make sure there's nothing that's going to drip onto it. Since this does have this dry belt right here, make sure that none of the lubrication on the pulley at the top is dripping onto the bottom of the motor. And pop that through. Pop that on. There we go. Flip it. One. Put the first screw in. Don't make it super tight to line up the second screw. And then once they're lined up and you got them both in, then torque them down snug. Don't over torque them. You don't want to strip the screws out. That. just going to twist these wires together just to make sure it works like it's supposed to. Because testing it with a power supply is different than testing it with the actual unit. The power supply is sending power directly to the motor. The unit is sending it to the motor and the lights and the speaker. Well, not the speaker again, because I have that disconnected. But with the power going in multiple directions, sometimes the motor can get a lower voltage and it will not spin. So. Get this motor out of the way. It's just hard to grab with my fingers. Oh yeah, there's no power going to the motor. It's because we unplugged it. Right, I unplugged it. Y'all watched me unplug it. And there we go. Hopefully you can see it, but just in case. There you go. Peppermint wheel. Look at that. So, pretty simple. Kind of moderately to open the house to get into it, but not horrible. Like I said, the plastic houses are much easier to work on. Less likely you have to send it to somebody if you have some basic hand tools. If you don't have a spudger, a blade screwdriver works just fine. Something like that. A long Phillips, if you have something like this, see if you can get something like this. This came in a 6-pack of different length screwdrivers from Harbor Freight. It was like $6 when I got it many years ago, so it's probably $10 now. They're cheap. They're by Central Forge. Whew. Never really read them before. And it's already slightly bent, it wobbles, but it works good. I keep it in here because I bought 2 sets, one for my outside toolbox and one for in here, because it will reach down into dark or deep areas. So you can pick them up at Ace Hardware. You can pick them up at the Harbor Freight. So, but now that it's spinning and it's quiet, I want to just double check the gears again. She's looking good. Vibrating on the desk, but other than that, she's good. So, now we're going to heat shrink and solder these bad boys. And then we're going to reassemble. So I got my soldering iron warming up. I'm going to keep these twisted together. Make sure they're good. No frays. So if you have this piece and you need to take it apart, you don't have to take this base piece off if you don't want to. I've never taken it apart. Didn't know which way to do it, but for the future I know the platform doesn't have to come off. There you go. Piece of heat shrink cut in half. Going to trim the tips of these off because the tips are just a few strands of wire that aren't really attached to anything. There's multiple ways to heat shrink. I'm going to heat shrink it like a wire nut, meaning that the 2 wires are on one side of the heat shrink. It's not common, but it is used quite often in Lemax. You don't want to do this professionally on like a house. That would be bad. Or a car. But for this, it's not going to hurt it too much. Now you can use a hair dryer, etc. Something warm. I'm just going to use a lighter real quick to shrink these down. Like so. And let's turn it off. I'll just unplug it so we can put this back in. So this impossible gear, the teeth mesh into the gear that does the spiral right here in the front. So when you set this in here, make sure that your teeth mesh. You don't want to screw it down and then have it not mesh and then potentially break the gearing. Also make sure you put it in right side up. So, oh, sounds like my dog's starting to bark. Probably hears something outside. Let me give him hell. Yep. Never fails whenever you're filming. Now, the only downside of these is they're not magnetic. So, I will hold it in with a pair of needle nose pliers. And one of the reasons it's unplugged versus just turned off is the back of the power port has an exposed hot. It's low voltage, so it's not going to do a lot of damage to you, but it can damage the equipment. So if you unplug it, there's no power on the exposed hot, and that's standard on all of these barrel jacks, whether it's in the Lemax house or your Walkman or your Casio keyboard, doesn't matter. They don't seal the back of them. It's one screw. It's two screws. Now this last one's going to be fun since this is not magnetic. And I have no idea where my neodymium miniature magnets are I can stick on the shaft to give it some magnetism. So, needle nose pliers, and stick it down in, and try and look with some magnifiers and see if I can get it to line up. Use another screwdriver just to hold the back open so I can get my screwdriver in here and not fight it as much. And it fell out. Awesome. And there we go. It's in. Just tightening it up. So, trying to do this with the least amount of intrusion as possible, which is why I'm not tearing the whole thing apart, like I did with Hideous Harry's Toy Factory from Halloween 2 years ago. I did that also because I wanted to modify the piece. That's why I tore it down to brass tacks and show you how to do it. But if you can do it with the least amount of intrusion, you're most likely going to have a better success rate of non-breakage. So, feeding the excess wire down so it doesn't get caught in that pulley into the bottom area. And now I'm going to try and put this back wall back where it needs to go. Click. All right. Juice. There you go. So you got the gears, the corkscrew, the belt, and the spinning wheel on the left side. So now it's time to put this thing back together. I'm going to start with the big base, just so I have a sturdy platform that I'm not putting any pressure on the circuit board. Make sure that none of your wires get pinched when you screw it together. A couple of the wires have fallen behind where the space gets screwed on, and I don't want these wires to get pinched and cut. So, like that in the track. So. So now you know how to check your gears, how to check your belt, how to get to it to replace it when it finally dies, and your motor. This wire fell back behind it again. Last one. There we go. So all the screws are now in the bottom. So I have a more stable platform. And I can put this wall in still. So let's turn it back on, make sure nothing got damaged in reassembly. Still got movements and lights. Slide it up underneath those gussets. Kind of walk it into place. It's going to try and catch on its fingers. The back side I got over. Just got to work the front side. So I'll use a very small blade screwdriver versus the spudger, so it doesn't take up as much space. It's this finger here that's getting caught. Let's try a little different angle of the dangle here. Let's do the front first and then the back. So apparently you will have to put this sidewall in about the same time you do the back wall, because the finger just will not slide over that piece. Just broke the plastic clips, I think. No, they're still intact. They just all popped at once. So this whole top section can come off. That'll make life even easier if you had to work on it. Clip, 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 clip. So let's get the back wall, or the side wall in, and then pop the top back on. The only part that was glued was this pipe. And since it's off, there's your gearbox at the top that drives the belt. So the motor drives the screw. The screw has a gear right here, right there. It's a ring gear driving another gear, which then drives the belt. So if your upper gears break, you're going to have to pop the top off. You got to clip 2 clips in the front, 1, 2 in the back, 1 back here, and then 2 in the back as well. And then the only thing that's glued is this pipe, which we'll glue back on once we get the top back together. So, yeah, that's one of the joys of plastic. It's a little easier to dismantle and reassemble. There we go. See, it's clipped into place, lifting it by the piece that popped off. So, if you break the glue free on the Elf-made Toy Factory pipe, right there, you can pop the whole top off, and then you can remove the side wall and peel that out farther. I was trying to avoid that because I thought it might have been glued on. I was wrong. So there's another way to access the insides. Just making sure the sides are all clipped in, everything's pushed down. Good. So now, just need to get a screw, fix the switch, so that way it doesn't keep coming off. I still have no idea where this goes. It looks like it was glued on. I know the character goes here. I don't see any glue pads on this rotating disc, unless it came off of this. But this looks too big for those toys on the belt. They're way too big for the toys on the screw. Well, hopefully the owner knows where this goes, because I honestly have no clue. Also, I don't know where that... Oh, I think I figured it out. That brass hook goes inside here, and I bet you it's hanging on this. And that explains this little elf guy with his arms up. He's either guiding it up or trying to catch it. Alright. There's the sign. There's the hook. That's what I mean by looking at stuff, trying to get an idea where it may go, or how to take something apart. Just never seen the piece in a disassembled fashion. And even when I did see it maybe over at the Michaels, I don't remember how it was all put together. Plus at Michaels, they don't always put the accessories on. Remember, when you have this Gorilla Glue, don't let it land on its side for a long period of time, because it glues the cap on. Can't get the cap off because it's glued on. There we go. Yeah. So glue this pin in, I am going to hot glue the character back on. The reason being is if this ever needs to be opened back up, it'll be easier to remove the character with hot glue than super glue. Here we go. I'm only going to put a drop on this pipe. I'm not going to hot glue. It's going to be hard to get in here in the strings, but if I put just a drop, if I can get it to drop, come on. There we go. Let it run down. That drop will allow you to break it free with a spudger. One drop isn't going to do a lot. It's not the old crazy glue commercial where he puts one drop and then hangs from his hard hat. So just got to hold it. Then we'll put the bottom on so the speaker works. Okay, never heard the soundtrack before.
Here in Santa's factory, the elves make toys for you and me, so in the morning you will see your favorite toy underneath your tree. Holidays are coming, and there is no time to wait. The elves are hard at work, yes, all the toys have to be made.
Could have sworn I had a rubber band in here to hold this in place.
Here in Santa's factory, the elves make toys for you and me, so in the morning you will see your favorite toy.
Turn that off. The humming sound you hear is I'm adding static with my fingers because the exposed contacts of the switch. Get the hot glue gun going. Sure, it goes just like that. Hey, the super glue is finally holding. Look at that. Yeah, I'm sure that hangs on the hook just like this. Still good? Yeah. Interesting. It's got a really interesting soundtrack, so if you never heard it, you just got to hear it now. And that's a first for me. Again, because I don't do the Christmas stuff, and I don't remember the soundtrack being on at Michael's when this was on display a couple years ago. It's not a bad looking house. It's very reminiscent of some of the Halloween ones with the rotating gears on the outside. Very reminiscent of the Dr. Stretch and Poe's Torture Factory. This rotating disc with characters on it is used in many things, whether they're small disc or a large disc for characters or items to go around. The belt system's been used on stuff as this piece, but on the Halloween it would be the Haunted Horror Hotel. Uses the belt to move the characters up the staircase. So there's a lot of pieces in here that are very similar to other pieces. Recycling and makes the cost stay down. Some people would disagree that the costs are staying down, but nonetheless, that's usually the intent. Also makes it faster to build something. If you're using stuff you've already used in the past, You're not creating new technology, you're just repurposing old. I do like the lights on it. I think the lights look pretty good. I think this one's kind of weird. Probably not supposed to be pointed at the roof. There we go. I don't think that one's supposed to be pointed inside the window. Makes more sense to use it to illuminate the sign in the roof up here. Anyhow, that's this piece. So I'm going to get this glued on right now. I'm just going to put a little dab will do ya. That way in the future it can be removed easier. And put it back into his spot like so. Now I'm going to tip it on his back and put the screws back in. And then the little rubber feet. So, if yours dies, no lights, no sound, no motion, most likely bad motor. So, take out the 6 rubber feet, take out the 6 metal screws. They're Phillips, they're number 1. So make sure you have a number 1 Phillips. And then unplug the motor. You saw how easy it was. And then the lights came back and the sound came back. Then you can pop the back and side off at the top as well, just if you're going to pop the top off. Gluing on each house seems to vary from house to house. Some are really good, some are really bad. Make sure that you check that gray pipe right there to make sure that you can pop it off the edge if you're going to pop the top off. I wasn't intending for it to pop off, but apparently with the back wall and the side wall off, the majority of the clips that hold it in place have already been removed, so there wasn't much holding it. Just a couple of more clips on one side and that glued in pipe. But as you saw, I just pressed it back together. Now if for some reason you break all the clips off, because that does happen, especially when pieces get older and are stored outside in a shed or a storage facility that's not climate controlled, things get brittle. You can glue it together. I would recommend using hot glue so you can heat it up to separate it again. Anything that's mechanical, hydraulic, electrical, pneumatic will, in time, fail without any, warning. It just happens. Yeah, there we go. Just making sure they're all snug before I glue the feet back on. I'm going to glue them on with the hot glue gun. Not going to use super glue, because if I did, you'd never get them back out again, and then if you have to fix it, it's a pain. You can kind of see the process. We need a little screw. Ah, look at that. I have a bad switch right here that still has the screw. So while the glue gun's getting hot again, put the screw you. Alright, so that pretty much concludes this one. Wasn't too terribly difficult. The hardest part was trying to figure out how to get into it without potentially breaking the plastic, but it really wasn't that bad. So, quick recap, the base comes out. The base comes off to access the circuit board. You can unplug your components there, and then you can remove the top piece, break the pipe free, and you can take off the sidewall and peel the back one out to get to the gearbox to replace the gears on the lower end, and to... Look at that, the wheel feels better now it's attached. And then of course reassembly is just the reverse of disassembly. Tools you're probably going to need is a spudger and maybe one or two number 1 or number 2 screwdrivers in the electronic size like this. And if you're going to cut out the motor, a pair of small cutters. Doesn't have to be like this. They could be standard big wire cutters, or the inside of those pliers where they have the cutter. You can use this style too, which is more familiar versus these. Strip the wire back, solder it, cover it with heat shrink, or how Lemax does it a lot is they put a glob of hot glue on it as an insulator, so that way it doesn't arc. When you put your wires back, the bottom back on, if you take it apart, make sure your wires aren't pinched under the base. And that's pretty much it. Look, you're going to have to probably remove this guy, unless you do it from the top. If you need to take this outer wall out, this little guy is going to have to come off. It's not too hard to remove, he's just hot glued on. I wouldn't use a heat gun if you can avoid it, because he is a rubbery type plastic, more susceptible to getting, well, melted. More acceptable to overheating and distortion. If your switch box is weird, you probably don't have the screw either. I've noticed on some of this doesn't have the screws that hold the switch in either. I've noticed that they're cheaping out on their little box assembly. It technically works, but cheaping out on the 2 bigger screws is fine because the box clip together. If your clips are intact, the switch isn't going to move. But there is enough flex in the wheel to cause it to pop off without that screw. This is not one that turns off and then restarts to reset itself. So if you have it hooked up to a power supply, you can turn it off without using the switch. So, but anyhow, this concludes the Elf-Made Toy Factory from Lemax. So if you have any questions, comments, put them below. Standard. Wasn't too horrible. Like I said, one of the advantages of plastic. Still took an hour, but if you're doing it by yourself and not talking to a camera, and now that you know how to do it, what parts you need to remove and not remove, you can probably get it done in 30 minutes or less. So, especially if you have the tools handy, you don't have to go dig into a drawer as you're doing it. So, but anyhow, thanks for watching. Until the next one, have a good one.